Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Aiza Umar. Two major developments have happened in Afghanistan. US is allegedly demanding US military bases in Afghanistan to remain there in operation and asking the Taliban to not use Afghanistan soil for attacks on the US or other countries. Now, how true are these statements? Are talks going on directly between the Taliban and the US? Let's talk to our panel of experts and hear their analysis. Let me welcome here Ms. Ile Irshad, parliamentarian of the National Assembly of Afghanistan. Welcome to Newswire. And also we have with us Mr. Adnan Qaiser, a research associate at the Conference of Defense Associations Institute in Ottawa, Canada. He's visiting Pakistan, and so will be joining us here from Rawalpindi. Now, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, has time and again, and especially in light of these peace talks taking place, has continuously said that the Taliban need to speak with the Afghan government. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, has also been saying the same thing for years, and he's been accused of being a Taliban apologetic, and now finally the world seems to agree what he was saying was right. Mr. Adnan, how do you see the Afghan Taliban and the US and other regional powers trying to get together to come to the negotiating table unfold in the current situation?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me in your program. It's a delight to be there. And assalamu alaikum to all your viewers. So first of all, if you allow me to answer the comments which was made by the participant, Ms. Ile, about this Afghan insurgency as being a proxy war. Unfortunately, she has to go back in the history of this insurgency which took place. It's not a proxy war. It is an indigenous movement by the Taliban, whatever regime or group was. And so this is an internal affair of Afghanistan. So it's not a proxy war, and it is very unfortunate that Pakistan Army and its intelligence agency is associated somehow with this insurgent movement in Afghanistan. So having said that, so Pakistan has always, if I go back to 2001, when this Enduring Freedom operation started, it was Pakistan had always had been counseling that since this is a political issue, it has to be sorted out politically, and there is no military solution to that. Wisdom has come through suffering. And after 17 years, and now it is this political solution is being pursued, and which is very encouraging. And Pakistan has always played a very supportive and very positive role in this Afghan war. We had been our frontline state. If you recall, during the Afghan jihad against the Soviet Union, Pakistan had been a frontline state. And during this Afghan war, we also played a very crucial role. And we had been very supportive. And, we were designated as a major non-NATO ally in 2004. It's a very, very encouraging and very supportive for Pakistan's actions or Pakistan's help in bringing a resolution to this Afghan problem, this political problem. So whatever we are doing, we had been doing in the past as well. So this is nothing new. So whatever Prime Minister Imran Khan and Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi have said, this is a reiteration of our fundamental stance that there is no military solution to Afghan problem. Taliban are an indigenous movement. They are very much part of the Afghan fabric, and they need to be accommodated. So when we say it has to be an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process, so obviously we encourage that all parties could come together and resolve this issue in line with their historic and very, very historic cultural background.
And you're saying is that the government continues to offer an olive branch to the Taliban to come to the negotiating table and come and set up an interim government, right? So, Mr. Adnan, let me come to you on this. Would you see what we see on the headlines is, of course, one story. We're trying to interpret what's really actually happened on the ground in terms of a strategic move by the US, especially when they talk about withdrawing troops. Now, but when we look at what just how the developments have taken place, just in July last year, in 2018, a NATO summit basically pledged that we will continue to stay there till 2024 to train the Afghan security forces. Do you see beyond what this statement is saying?
Well, first of all, allow me to say that the mindset of coalition troops, the NATO forces in Afghanistan, had been pretty confusing right from the onset. Since this war started in Afghanistan, allow me to refer you back to when this war actually started in October 2001. So there had been 3 or 4 major periods of the war. So in December, from October, obviously, in 2001 to 2004, this was the first period when Taliban were pretty much crushed militarily, and they were de-seated from their seat in Kabul. And then in 2003, 2004, if you recall, the U.S. Shifted its focus towards the Iraq war. And obviously, it lost its focus from Afghanistan. So at that time, Taliban regrouped. This was a period between 2005, 2009. In 2009, again, if you recall, there had been a surge of troops. And then with a timeline, given that the NATO forces would be withdrawn from Afghanistan starting from 2011, 2012. So, this statement, which was called that, you might be having the watches, but Taliban have all the time at their end. So, this is one point. So this strategic move, Winston Churchill had said something like that Americans can be expected to do the right thing after having expended all other viable options. So this is pretty unfortunate that they took about 17 years to come to this conclusion that this is an unwinnable war. There had been books written on it. Scholarships have been saying that there is no military solution to that. Taliban are part of the Afghan fabric. 60% of Afghan population is Pashtun. And obviously, you cannot eliminate Taliban or Pashtuns from the Afghan society. So now this has been dawned on the international forces as well. So if you recall, in August 2017, President Trump came out with a very, very hard-hitting statements against Pakistan, that Pakistan is allegedly supporting Taliban, and obviously there had been some threats of cross-border attacks on Pakistani soil and hot pursuit operations. We withstood that threat very ably. All credit goes to Bajwa Doctrine, which is associated to our Army Chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa. So we withstood that. And now, obviously, after 1 year, they have come to this realization that there is no military solution. Now, coming to your point, that there are although they have concluded that they have to withdraw. But again, there is a half-hearted approach in this. They do not want to withdraw fully from Afghanistan because if you allow me to, in the subsequent arguments, I would tell you that what are the U.S. constraints that it does not want to fully disengage from this region. If you have read the news today, the White House has asked the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, to prepare a report about carrying out airstrikes or military operation in Iran. So there is always a bigger picture. they have dawned that they're going to talk with the Taliban, but Taliban are very shrewd negotiators. We have seen them in the past. They always, they have their priorities cut down, and obviously, it's very unfortunate that the Afghan society has been divided into different ethnicities, and historically speaking, they had been at each other's throat. And if there had been a report by one of Afghanistan's government's organization, it had unearthed some unmarked graves, some mass graves had come out of the civil war which took place in 1992. And so I'm not very positive, very confident about the post U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, what would be the situation. So that is why this is one of the considerations that the United States wants to keep some of the bases in Afghanistan to counter that Afghanistan does not spill into another civil war. Pakistan has played a very constructive role in the past, and Pakistan is now leading. This is a regional approach. Obviously, if you see
Mr.
Iran,
Adnan,
China.
Let me ask Mr. Adnan here, because I see two problems emerging in this narrative, and this has been discussed ad nauseum and on all across media, but we don't seem to be going anywhere. First of all, Mr. Adnan, there is this one concern that if the US is demanding that they remain in Afghanistan with their military bases, doesn't that mean that their military presence continues, which is exactly what the Taliban is against?
Exactly. So first of all, just recall the history lessons. Afghan have always been very independent historically. Right. They have never allowed any foreign troops or foreign forces on their soil. So this British, the Anglo-Afghan wars were unsuccessful. And then we saw in the situation of Soviet Union's invasion in Afghanistan in December 1979. And the same principle applies to the US and US-led NATO forces in Afghanistan. So there is no future of having any foreign boots on the ground in Afghanistan. So this is, first of all, this doesn't go with the ethos of Afghan nationalism. Right. So Taliban, I'm not sure. Maybe they are very pragmatic people. They may allow some of the troops to stay behind, but again, for having some foothold in Kabul for their political benefits. But again, allow me to. This two points I would like to reflect. First of all, this Ms. Ely has mentioned that this Afghan peace talks have to be done between Taliban and the Afghan government. So unfortunately, it's very unfortunate that the Afghan unity government has been discredited right from the beginning. Successive Afghan governments have been seen as illegitimate.
I'm sorry, let me come to you, Adnan, once again, the conversation. Thank you so much, Ms. Ely, for that. And let's move on to you. Mr. Adnan, I want to ask you this question, this old rhetoric of it being a proxy war. I know we've answered this before, but if we are to focus a little on the militant groups that are operating there, that the Taliban is fighting, especially in light of what has just unfolded on Sunday, where US and Afghan security forces raided a Taliban prison and released 40 of these. How do you see this reflecting on the current scenario, especially when they're all trying to come together on the same agenda?
Allow me to address the three questions which have been raised in the recent comments, and I do not want to hurt the sensibilities of those participants who are from Afghanistan, but let's get some things very straight. this Taliban is part of the Afghan nationalism, and they had right from the beginning when President Karzai was brought into power and Northern Alliance were given a seat in Kabul, they were not accepted. So there is absolutely no question of recognizing the Afghan government by the Taliban and negotiating with them. Rather, in one of my latest articles, papers, I had mentioned that it's going to be a very, very brutal civil war kind of a situation, reminiscent to what had happened when the Soviets withdrew, and in 1992 we had a Afghan civil war. So there is a lot of talk that that the Taliban should talk to the Afghan government. It's very, very unfortunate, and please excuse me for saying this upfront, that it's not only Pakistan or in the region, but in the Western countries also. There is a very, very strong conviction that the current Afghan government has been discredited. It's corrupt to boot. It had been unable to sort out Afghanistan's development and economic issues. So if you go back, and President Karzai, if you remember, he was sorry to say that he was labeled as a mayor of Kabul, with not having his jurisdiction in the periphery areas. So the same thing applies to the Afghan government. And I had written in one of my papers in 2010 that when push comes to shove, all these foreign qualified officials who are sitting at plum jobs, they will take the first flight out of Afghanistan. And if you see the Economist, which is very prestigious paper, it had written 200,000 had already fled from Afghanistan by 2016.
Mr. Adnan, let me get your comments on this, what Ms. Amna portrayed here. Do you feel like that strategy is in alignment to what the U.S. is looking for? And will they stick around long enough to carry something like this out?
If you go back to the Iraq War, during when its end was near, General Petraeus was accused of bribing the Sunni tribes in Iraq, in Mosul and other areas, and so that they keep themselves passive. And as Daesh emerged in Iraq, they were wearing U.S. fatigue. They had the Hummer jeeps and everything, and then obviously it took a while for the international community to counter them. Again, then it spilled over into Syria. So when we come to Afghanistan about talking about the IS, IS is a phenomena which emerged in 2014 and 2015. And if you recall, Mullah Akhtar Mansour, the last Taliban chief, he had written a letter. At that time, he was the deputy commander, and then second to Mullah Omar. And he had written a letter to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in 2015, asking him to stay away out of Afghanistan. So Taliban are very clear about their position, that they are not going to allow any extremist organization, any Al-Qaeda type or ISIS type of organization. And now there is a resolve, which Ms. Amina was saying. If you see, there had been a very, very an historic meeting which has took place in 11th of July 2018 in Islamabad, when all the intelligence chiefs, they got together and they had a resolve. Iran, Russia, China, and Pakistan, and they had a resolve to eliminate ISIS from Afghanistan.
And unfortunately, this is all that I have. Thank you so much, Mr. Adnan.